speakers also have joined us this morning. I want to welcome my sisters and members of Nala Council. My name is Chebbi. I'm the founder of Nala Feminist Collective, and I have the honor to chair this esteemed council, which I'm going to introduce. So on my right, Oluwaseun, Osowobi, the founder of Stand to End Rape Initiative in Nigeria, extremely determined activist to end sexual and gender-based violence, but not just talking about it, she's really going to the community to make a difference. On my left, Wachuka, Chief of Staff of Chief Justice and President of Supreme Court of Kenya, who had really a decade of public service, advancing a lot of issues from education to foreign affairs to culture and sports. So we're really honored to have her on our council. And then we have my sister, Rosebell Kagumire from Uganda, a human rights defender and unapologetically feminist. And then on the end of my left is Natasha Mwansa from Zambia, sexual reproductive health and rights activist, our youngest council member, only 21 years old. And she's mobilizing her peers, opening spaces to be part of these global conversations. So, do you want me to start introducing the book, right?
Just in a minute, I'd like everyone to just put their hands together for this amazing ladies. It takes a lot to come around from your own country. We all know how the Niger hustle is. The Niger hustle is what got me late, actually. So let's put our hands together for them. So, just before we get into it, I'm just going to give you a very, very brief overview of what the Nala Collective Forum is about. Now, the inaugural Nala Summit, this is hosted on the Nigerian government under the patronage of the Federal Ministry of Gender Affairs in Nigeria. Now, I'd like to know if anybody knows exactly what Nala is or where the name Nala came about. Anyone? Any ideas? Okay. Anyone watch The Lion King here? If you watch The Lion King, just put your hands, just wave. If you can't wave, just give me a smile, low key. Beautiful, beautiful. Real quick, I'm gonna have Chebbi give us a little bit of detail about the name Nala itself.
Yeah, exactly. Nala is Simba's friend. But Nala is really about being who you are. And I think this is also the idea of the book. I am Nala. I am my radical self. I am my badass self. I am my feminist self, unapologetically. Nala in Kiswahili means the lioness, the queen, the successful. Nahla in Arabic as well. In many African culture, Nala always means something thriving, something positive. And I think that's why, we opted for this name, because it represents the mission of our collective, that we are at the forefront of this and we are being ourselves. And we want to inspire women and girls around the continent and diaspora to also do that.
I'd like us to put our hands together for Chebbi. If you have a queen in your household, if you are a queen or you know a queen, I'd love for you to, give a round of applause real loud. Beautiful. Now, the Nala Feminist Collective is a Pan-African front for feminists with a mission to foster, enable, and mobilize women and girls from Africa and diaspora. They actually bridge the gap between policy, implementation. Having a chat with Aya a while ago, she mentioned the fact that, yes, the Nala Feminist Collective Forum gets to sit with stakeholders across different demographics. But it does not mean when you step out of line, they won't carry their placards. So they're pretty much the nexus between the two. I've said quite a lot, and I'm going to throw the ball right back to Chebbi to give us more details and the beautiful women on this team. But just before we do that, I'd love a proper round of applause.
Thank you so much, Okeme. So I want to actually describe this book in the words of the managing editor, Dr. Novuyo Tshuma of Zimbabwe, who beautifully described the book in her editorial notes. Nala book is 7 chapters that narrate powerful and empowering journeys of becoming and overcoming. The women in this anthology are deeply attuned to the challenges and hardships faced by women and girls on the African continent and the diaspora. They do not shy away from speaking about the hardships, offering vulnerable stories that are emblematic of the ongoing disregard of women and girls in Africa and diaspora. Ultimately, these are triumphs of stories of change and agency, pave the way for the future of generations and making possible for what previously thought impossible. This is a compilation of stories. This project has been a very ambitious project that started with the vision of 17 stories of our 17 council members to tell really their journeys of leadership and what they advocate for, the journey of hardship that they've gone through, but also how they overcome it and how they arrive to where they arrive. It might seem easy, to see the leadership spaces they hold today, the activist voices they hold today, but it has been a growing and hard experience. I want to also acknowledge the support of editors of the book. Amina Slimani from Morocco, who is here. Amina, can you stand up so we see? One of our editors. Please clap for her. And Rahel Subhatu from Eritrea. Please, Rahel. Two other supporting editors, Dr. Riem Sayada from Kenya and Suraya Adi from Algeria. And I'm really mentioning the countries because this is an Africa-led, this is a women-led book, and this is a self-published collective, which is really tough and hard in our continent to do that. I want to also acknowledge the designer of this beautiful cover of the book, Neil Malilwe. Can you please stand up so we can recognize you? And who made it possible to put this together in a really short time. So each chapter of this book advocates for one of the Sustainable Development Goals and one of the demands of our manifesto. We have a manifesto called Africa Young Women Beijing Plus 25 Manifesto. It has 10 bold demands that when you come to the summit later in the afternoon, you will learn more about them. 4 authors wrote a chapter in this book are here, myself, Ulu, Rose, and Rosebell. But also 3 others weren't able to join us that I want to acknowledge. Honorable Bukholo Kinawendo, former Cabinet Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry of Botswana, and Kessie Swanye, peace building activist from Central African Republic, as well as Yasmin Warhan, founder of We Belong in the Diaspora. We are very proud of this body of work finally coming out to the world. I think we really got all emotional when we held in our hand the printed copy for the first time and seeing our chapters come to life because it was not easy to tell our stories. It's been a healing process in itself to really go through that. Many of us wanted to give up in the middle of it, and we supported each other to, let's just do this. Let's just tell the story as it is and let the world know. I really look forward for my fellow councils to really unpack the themes shared in the book, but also please join us in the Nalafem Summit this afternoon, where we will have extensive discussion on what's also on the book. So without further ado, I want to hand over to my council members, but I really want to read the editor's presentation of each of them because I think it was really beautiful. And I'm going to start with Rose Wachuka Macharia, the first female and youngest Chief of Staff of the Chief Justice and President of the Supreme Court of Kenya. She takes us through her journey growing up in a family of brilliant and strong-willed women whose excellence and trajectory was hampered by the limits placed on them by society. In writing that is intimate, contemplative, and intellectually and emotionally moving. Rose's commitment to fight for freedom of women and girls and her brilliant work to reform Kenya's legal system inspire a love for liberty and a feminist awakening. In fighting for the freedom of women and girls, she fights for the freedom of us all. Please give a round of applause to Rose Wachuka.
Thank you very much, my dear sister. Good morning. I join Aya in celebrating and honoring you all for coming to listen to our stories and for joining us to launch and celebrate this movement that we have created together. Reflecting on my experience writing the chapter that I called Shedding the Fear of Justifying Our Lives, it took me to the life of a child who was born with dreams on her shoulders and who recognized the innate ability to lead and to be the best, and who in fact emerged the best in school, in society, and who accomplished quite a lot, but who felt enchained by constant reminders by society to be lesser than. I started thinking about why I was treated differently from my 4 brothers. I come from a family of 5 and I'm an only girl. But I noticed that we were treated differently. I noticed that we were put in different things. I noticed that we were consulted differently. And this challenged my understanding and my thinking. And that lived reality made me very interested in tracing my family genealogy or lineage and unpacking the lives of women who had gone before me, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, and their experiences, and what then I carried to adulthood, and all the traumas that I had to shed, and all the narratives that I had to unpack, to really stand, to be on this stage, to be the youngest chief of staff to an entire judiciary, to live with microaggressions, to live with macroaggressions, to remind myself every day that nothing about me is normal, and nothing about me should be ignored or subjugated. And because I had a deep, deep love for my father, God rest his soul, I was convinced that the problem was not men. The problem has never been men. In fact, in this room, we have more men than women. I was just looking around and I noticed that. So we have great champions of women and women's cause. And I knew that the problem is the system, the patriarchal system. And so today, I just want to reveal to you what my understanding of patriarchy is. It is a social system that believes, propagates, and emboldens the stand that men are above women. And so our cause is not against men. Our cause is against a system that blinds us all to a culture of abuse, not protection, to a culture of subjugation, not uplifting, to a culture of supervision, not support, and to a culture of submission, not admission to the table, to shared spaces. And I invite you all to listen to our stories with an open soul. Open your souls to us and carry on that message as you have done by coming today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rose, for sharing with us. I want to now introduce my sister, Oluwaseun Ayodeji Osowobi, who is, I've met her, couple, I think, years, in a conference and seeing all these women around leading in the spaces, the global stage and regional spaces, but spending the last 3 days with her, really, I got to understand the fight, what she's fighting for, and she's really an advocate for survivals of gender and sexual-based violence in Nigeria, but also she's a bold voice in Africa and around the world. She's the founder of Stand to End Rape Initiative. In 2019, she established, or helped establish, Nigeria's first National Sexual Offenders Register. She takes us through her experience growing up in the southern part of Nigeria. And with keen and caring eye for the society around her, she narrates the formative experiences that led her groundbreaking activism and ultimately a seminal journey that has led to social and systemic change in Nigeria. This moving and empowering narrative reminds us that we can all rise up. We can all effect change in our societies, and in this way become the heroines of our own stories, and Nigeria should be proud to have Olu.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Aya. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for honoring our invite. We're glad to see you. And I'm so humbled and honored to share this stage with my amazing African sisters who are feminists disrupting the patriarchy. I want to start by reading a part of my chapter to give you a backstory as to why I do what I do. As an African woman, my struggles have different folds: oppression, oppressors, and enablers. Oppressive social and cultural practices have been reinforced over time, whether it has to do with inefficient policies, institutions, gender norms, or biases. Such practices perpetuate the vicious cycle of prioritizing men's liberty and freedom while caging women's rights and voices. The battle we fight today are not new, but they have different forms in today's world. Either gender pay gap, access to STEM spaces, and the big elephant in the room, sexual and gender-based violence. But looking into the future, my hope is for a society that embraces the existence of women and girls and respects them. A society that has space for them as equals, deserving of opportunities, just like their male counterparts. That is, where the older generation has stopped, we will proceed and achieve an equitable and just society for African women and girls. I write this chapter because as a young girl growing up in Lagos, and also partly in the north, I saw different vices that women and girls faced. And although the oppression was sort of different, but the impact was similar, which was women experiencing violence in their homes, in the workspace, in any space, either public or private, that we expect to be safe. So I've made it my life's mission to ensure that women can have a voice in Nigeria, but not just in the country, on the continent. And I have brilliant young people like myself working across Africa to achieve this. And I'm hoping that as you read this book, you don't only understand my journey as an activist, but you also learn lessons where I failed, that you may carry it on and continue to advocate for women's rights on the continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. I want to give the mic to my sister, Rosebell, a writer, an editor, a Pan-African feminist, activist, who works at the intersection of media, gender, and development. In Uganda's struggle to attain independence and define its freedom, Rosebell takes us through an intergenerational family tale of lives lived and hopes dreamed. She explores the legacy of colonial education and the boarding school system and its poignant effect on young girls. Told in both intimate and broad strokes, Rosebell deftly paints for us the breaking up of families, the disruption of indigenous teachings that are the social fabric of many African societies, coupled with the colonial legacies of the boarding school system that continues to make permissible the violation of girls' bodies. This poignant story is a rallying cry for the recognition of girls everywhere and a reform of Africa's colonial educational system, and I learned so much from you the last few days. So, my sister, take us forward.
Thank you so much. I feel honored to speak, having listened through all. I haven't read their stories, but I just seen the highlights, and I feel so much power and very privileged to be with you today. Reflecting on the book and my contribution to the book, and the process of writing the book, I chose something that was personal, because I'm a feminist. We say the personal is political, There's everything about you which you think is just your personal is political. It's already debated. It's already been decided in some way by society, whether it's a church, whether it's parliament, whether it's a mosque. All that has been, you come to this world, not just you're already in a certain social fabric that is determining what you describe freedom for yourself. So I was trying to really shed parts of me that might not be free to actually write such a story, because for me, I'm reflecting on the journey as a 13-year-old, as a 9-year-old in my country, but also situating myself in a world affected by, some of the most heinous oppression of our time, colonialism. The fact that oftentimes as African people we think that colonialism was an event that happened and ended, but rather than something that came to oppress us and erase us and take so much and destroy our own nations that were founded, and leaving us with spoils of countries, whether it's Nigeria or Uganda, right? To box us in borders where we continue to be violated without having a vision of where can we find that freedom. For me, the story was to look at a girl in an African country, using my own story today, and what we pursue as freedom. And I emphasize the fact that for women and girls, because you're a girl first, right? That's why it's very important to visit stories of girls and think about yourself, right? The freedom you get as a woman is very much pegged on how were you treated as a girl, how much freedom were you given. Then your journey is longer or shorter depending on how you were raised and how much you were given, which support, were you abused, were you enabled to be a better person. So for me, the story is about that. And it comes at a very critical time in the world where we see the pushback against reproductive rights. And the pushback against reproductive rights of women and girls is rooted in the social control of women's bodies. The idea that your body is not yours. That's where all control of women lies. The fact that we do not think that women can be trusted to make their own choices about their bodies right from childhood. And that's where abuse also resides. So I look at this boarding school system where we are born at a cusp where really majority of the continent, girls don't go to school still. And we are very privileged to be in school. But even in that privilege of being in school, you were still taken away rights. We went through forced pregnancy tests that would send chills to every child, and nobody had time to teach you why are they touching your body, It was assumed that you're supposed to show up and you're touched but nobody gave you any productive education about your body and what the body was going through and how can you prevent whatever they're trying to check, which is pregnancy. And it's horrifying to think that pregnancy, the one thing that can happen to a girl today, whether it's consensual or forced, that can determine their trajectory, that schools can throw you out just because one thing happened. How can someone's humanity be based on that? So I challenge in this book about the social control and regulation, looking at girls and teenagers that their bodies don't belong to them, and hence we debate them. We reach to control them. I'll just read lastly. For me, to write this story, it's very important to reflect on my privilege. And without thinking about your privilege, you can't really write authentically. So I will read. Still, I was privileged that my maternal grandfather was a teacher, and he made sure that my mother got an education. All my grandparents revered education. Those who hadn't gone far in school worked hard to see their children to go farther than them. Many women, in my families, had been educated past lower secondary. Many of them, not all of them. I never felt I would be denied an education because of my gender. And that's a privilege in a world which denies women to go to school. All this put me in a better place, right from my village to my school. But being in school and not being taught about your own body, and being at home where academic excellence was the only thing a teenager's mind was supposed to be dealing with, was not easy. Family and society insinuated that as a girl, you understood very well your parents' sacrifices, well enough not to fool around. So they neglect you. They don't give you the education you're supposed to do, the skill to take you through. So for me, that is very, very important to reflect. And in the conclusion, I say why I'm interested in this struggle. And I say my interest in women's liberation on this continent comes from deeper conversations within myself that force me to contend with what justice could look like for the next generation. We can have the right to education, the right to work, the right to vote. We can have women presidents and even be proudly shown off as pioneers in the fields where women and girls were denied entry for such a long time. But without ensuring that our bodies belong to us right from childhood, all these rights are built on sand. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, and I would love to also encourage you to share, Rosie, but this is a great transition also to my thoughts in the book, because I also reflect on my relationship with my father, whom I consider a feminist. So I'm gonna read from my chapter. When I got my period, they said, "Don't wear shorts, learn how to cook, don't cross your legs." My mom asked, "When are you getting married?" My dad asked, when are you getting your degree? At least he saw me before I saw myself. My father, a retired colonel major, served 42 years in the military of Tunisia, imbued in me a strong sense of self-worth and the conviction that I deserve the same chances in life as anyone else. He used his privilege as a man, as the head of the family, to pave the way for me to be and become. Regardless of our deep disagreements, my right to make my own choices was always guaranteed. And I think, I was really inspired by what you said about what is being a girl in this world, and the idea that your ultimate achievement is marriage. And the idea of a successful woman or a bold woman or women who made it is that confining patriarchal structure in your mind, and growing up without allowing you the right of choice, the right of freedom, the right to be. And I think this book is really about freedom and liberation. We're not asking too much. We just want to be free in this world. And there are, men like my father who are feminists who support that, and he got my back, right? So I want to also hand over to Rosie to read us something from her powerful story. And then I would like Natasha to also say a few words to our audience.
Thank you, Aya. I think you will notice that there's a common thread of relationships with our own fathers and with the male figures in our lives having shaped who we are. And mine is an intersection. I had a beautiful relationship with my father, who was also a feminist. But also my grandfather's story and stance taught me a lot. So allow me to read. Kenya's struggle for independence was not a diplomatic affair. In 1952, the Mau Mau Uprising, a nationalist movement organized to resist British rule in Kenya and fight for land, sparked a historic movement that forever changed the trajectory of the justice system in Kenya. My maternal grandfather, Madhege Wajari, then one of a handful of educated Kenyans, joined the battle. His efforts earned him 7 years in detention in Manda, an island in Lamu along Kenya's Indian Ocean coast, and in Fangano, an island on Lake Victoria in Kenya's city of Kisumu, then known as Port Victoria. My grandfather was a successful businessman who traded in alcohol and other consumer goods, and who owned businesses in the busy towns of Nanyuki and Karatina. He was a freedom fighter
who joined the war for independence because he believed that Africans could take charge of their national affairs and self-govern. He met my grandmother in 1964, a kind-hearted, fair-skinned woman with 2 young girls aged 1 and 3, whose work ethic and radiating beauty immediately caught his attention. He married her as a second wife. That is how my mother, the elder of the 2 girls, became his daughter. Although he was educated, my grandfather's level of exposure and the nature of his upbringing did not prepare him to raise 2 fiercely independent and intelligent girls whose brilliance was inconceivable. They quickly assumed notoriety for their stellar performance in academics. But my grandfather had other priorities besides ensuring that my mother and aunt were educated. When it became apparent to my grandmother that their education was not of any concern to her husband, she sought help from her brother, my grandfather Tumuti. He provided basic support by paying for their primary education, while my grandmother worked tirelessly to cover their post-primary education needs, including their college tuition. And I go on to narrate how my mother's dream of becoming a lawyer was denied because of that lack of support. My mother's dream was to become a lawyer. I inherited it as my own and committed myself to becoming a great jurist. I was 7 when I made that promise. I attribute my aunt's need for justice to the marginalization I observed in the lives of the women closest to me. Paradoxically, even though I admired my grandfather's contribution to the freedom struggle, I was fueled by a deep desire to reverse his prejudicial denial of my mother's education.
Thank you so much, Rose, for sharing with us. I want to give the floor to Natasha to introduce herself and share some thoughts on the Nalafem and her role in the council.
Okay, thank you so much. It's been absolutely inspiring to listen to these amazing ladies and authors of this wonderful book. And just to introduce myself, my name is Natasha Mwansa. I am a 21-year-old Zambian currently studying and pursuing a degree in media and communication studies with political science. So for me, this behind or in front of the cameras works for me at any time. But then I am also an activist and an advocate for women, girls, and young people. I also founded my own foundation. It's called the Natasha Mwansa Foundation, as well as I work with various institutions really, but my heart is in sexual and reproductive health and rights. And right now, what I really want to do is raise the next generation of superheroes to be able to do the same things that these amazing and bodacious women have done and have been able to accomplish. And so really my role is being a counselor on Nalites, an advisory board for the Nala Feminist Collective altogether. And we basically come together, ensure that the work of Nala progresses, give our feedback, and so much more. So it's been absolutely amazing this past 3 days. I'm really just going to make a quick comment on why having such a book is absolutely amazing and inspiring, if anything. There's a story that is told of a street in a certain place that had a haunted house. And so whenever people came to that particular street, they would ask and say, why don't people pass by that house? And everyone would say, oh, it's haunted. Years passed by until one man came and said, why don't people pass by that house? And they said it's haunted. So he decided to say, I want to see it for myself. I really want to see why it's haunted. And he went there. Then he came back and he changed the story. And apparently it was raccoons that used to make the noises that made people assume it was haunted. So the story went about again, saying there are raccoons there. There are raccoons there. Years on end, it changed from a haunted house to a raccoon-fested house. So someone went in and said, I want to see what these raccoons look like because they make way too much noise for it to be a raccoon. So they go there and then they come back and say, oh, it's really just noise because people are always partying there. So before they knew it, the narrative changed that it was a house that was a party house. And now before I go on and on, the narrative could keep on changing. But the idea is this. a story could literally shape people's view of the world, because it shaped people's view of that particular household. And so whenever people share their stories, it changes your view of what exactly the world looks like. And we should never take for granted what a story can do. I began my journey because I read about someone's story, and I read about the wonderful things that they did, and I realized that I too have the power to change the world, and I too can do something to contribute to that. So I really would just love to emphasize that this book is an amazing, it captures stories that transform lives and that inspire people to know that the narrative can change because of the stories that have been shared and the stories that have been told. And I'm sure that as media people, you of all people understand how much one single story can actually change a society in so many diverse ways. So I really do hope that these stories go out and that they keep inspiring young African women, and that these unified voices actually keep speaking and are even more amplified through such work and through such books, and that even as the other books are coming out, the support will still be strong, because we need these books to inspire the next generation of young females in Africa and around the world to know that their stories can change the world and their stories have got impact. And so I would end by posing this particular question. If you could write a book about your life, what would the title be? What would it say about you? Your stories are going to outlive you. They're going to outlive and speak for generations after you. And yesterday we had an amazing convening on intergenerational dialogue, and one of the questions asked was, we don't know where the fight has ended or where to begin, because we don't have a trail to follow through. But this is why documenting stories is absolutely vital, because we then know what progress has been made, what the landmark is, and we can keep on fighting from there. So whatever your story is, I hope it will be a story of impact and world-changing stuff, because that's what we need for society to move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha, and I want to hand over to Kevin.
Wow, I'd like us to just give a round of applause again for all the council members. A story can indeed change the world, and it definitely will change the narrative. I mean, it is not an easy process to take your weak moments and turn it into strength and actually document it for the change that you look after. Could we please give them a round of applause one more time? Just before we get to the press, the questions, I'm just going to give you a little bit more details, because I feel like we haven't really, given them the accolades they deserve. The Nala Council consists of 17 women leaders under the age of 40, who are the youngest ministers, parliamentarians, activists, and innovators, advocating for the B25 manifesto and the implementation of the Action Coalition's commitment towards the decade of action. Oftentimes, we get told that women do not know what they want. These women definitely know what they want and what change they want in the world. Please, a round of applause one more time for them. Press members, please feel free to ask your questions, and the council members will be more than happy to give you the right responses. I know a lot of us, feminists, we don't really understand what it is. No, it's not just women that say it's all about women. So I think now would be the best time to ask those questions on your mind just before we end this session. Members of the press, this is your golden hour. Please, you can stand right up. Or yet again, you can come right to the front. I mean, you're not shy of the press, aren't you? We'd love to hear your beautiful, beautiful voice. A round of applause, just some encouragement for her, please. It takes a lot to come out the front.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Margaret Ogbo. I report for Silverbird Television. Now, feminism has been, greatly misunderstood over the years, because people think you are not just fighting for equity, for inclusion, you're taking the whole fight the other way. So I would like to know what, I'd like to find out from you what message you would pass to people who genuinely want to be feminists, but they don't want to be caught up in, the story of being, partisan and all of that. So what advice do you have for people? And then for feminists who are taking the whole thing, blowing the whole thing out of proportion, what do you have to say to them as well? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Who would like to get on that one? It's quite a nugget. Please just show with a raise of hands, and a microphone will be passed to you if you don't really want to come right to the front. I mean, I love the spotlight, but if you don't, that's okay. I think we'll take 2 questions, and then we will get to the answers while the brainstorming session is still on. In a couple of minutes, this press conference will be done. The mic will get right to you, sir. All right, please, the next question.
Good morning. My name is Ruth Obozege from AIT. So I have quite a number of questions for Madam. So the first one is, what is the concept of feminism in Nigeria? And then the assertion that it is responsible for the disruption of relationships and families. That's one. Is it a force for good or bad? What are the aspects of feminist creed, and how does it sit with the African culture of, the man first, we're not equal in Africa and all that? And also, how can the positive aspect of it be channeled to human development and growth? So those are my questions. Thank you.
I think we will have one more question just before we get to the answers, and then we will take a couple more. Or could we have the gentleman with the amazing, I'm not very good with my colors, but I would call it an aqua sort of merge. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. All right. I just want to know from my sister here, the one in Nigeria here, doing her very good job. Actually want to know, like they said, catch them young. How have you been able to take this down to secondary school, so that we can actually get them know from the young age that this is what actually this feminist marketing is. Thank you.
All right. I think we'll take some of the answers, and we'll get right back to more questions. That's a lot. I am so happy I am not sitting up there. Please.
I know that when we started this work of Nala, we knew the burdens we were carrying from this term feminist or feminism. But we were bold enough to carry it anyway, because I think, as I explained earlier, feminism responds to a system of patriarchy. And the system of patriarchy is a social system, an embedded social system that believes, propagates, and emboldens the stand that men are above women. And there are intersections of gender, of context, and feminism disagrees with this system. But the people who still want to retain that system of patriarchy have gone full out on a campaign against the broader term feminism. And there is not a single uniform approach to feminism, because actually we live in different contexts, we live in different realities, we live in different post-independence structures. And we live in situations that call for different priorities of needs. And so I'm very happy that the question that posed, the second question posed the context in the Nigerian context. Because the Nigerian context may have some similarities with the Kenyan context, but also some differences. So if I could, say something that you can walk away with today, is that feminism is not a fight against men. It's not. You've listened to our stories and you've heard how deeply inspired we were by the men in our lives and continue to be. But it challenges a system that places privilege on men as opposed to women and makes us believe it, even women. In India, 35 million girls are killed in vitro, meaning that there is a system that actually believes that even before you're born, you're lesser than. Your value in the world is lesser than. And feminism responds to that system because it is actually an abusive system and is a system that goes to the core of human dignity. And so we should all be charged to the cause. If you believe in human life, if you believe in human dignity, if you believe in human rights, then you're a feminist, whether you call yourself one or not.
Thank you, Rose, for that elaborate answer. But I would go further to be that feminist who's too much. There is the very idea, feminism is both a practice and an ideology. Many people, men, women, have spent generations studying this. You actually go to school and study just like you go to do political science. So for me, things must be having an intellectual grounding. So you engage with something because you just see it on paper and you don't know what it is, right? So I don't think you can engage in communism without understanding what communism is. I cannot critique communism without reading what communism is. And the danger is that often people want to critique something they don't know. They just have little frames of what they saw here and there, but they have not invested. And I respect intellectual labor. I respect seeking of knowledge. That's why we have a book, because this is a body of knowledge. I do not respect ignorance. So we have to fight the fight against ignorance, yeah? Because every resistance to something is rooted in ignorance. And if you don't fight ignorance of what you're fighting for, you will not win, because it is a war of narrative and what people project that to be. That said, there's no feminism that is going to be about coddling men, because men are privileged. They are privileged from birth. They have a right to inherit land. Women on this continent don't have a right to land. Very few, even as educated as we are. When you go to family meeting, you don't have a right to land. So I'm sorry, when we were fighting the struggle for liberation, like Rose talked about her father, women were in the trenches. But when we came out of independence, what did we see in our parliament? At the African Union, men, 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 men. We cannot fight oppression with nice words. We did not fight white people to leave our continent by being nice, to say, oh, can you please leave? The fight for freedom will never be civil. And unless you are committed to that, you will never fight. And that's what it's about. So you can choose where your limits are, but you do not have a right to choose the limits of anybody who's trying to fight for their freedom. They can choose whatever language, whatever tools. If you just had NSAS here. People are like, you're too much, you're on the streets. Who determines what is too much for an oppressed person? You use the tools you have, you go on the streets. If you want to storm parliament, storm it. You must be hard as a person. But unfortunately, when it comes to the rights of people who are historically marginalized, women, whether it's different ethnicities, people start lecturing you, you're being too much. But that's a language of an oppressor. Anybody can be whatever they want to be. If it's too much for you, get out of the room. There are many rooms that you'll find that accommodate you. I do not agree with anybody being too much. You're who you are. You fight with the tools, with the means that you have. That's why for me, my grounding is in fighters like Malcolm X. He said, I do not believe in nonviolence. I believe that nonviolence is something I give back to a nonviolent person. We're dealing with violent systems. My sister is fighting rape right from families. Fathers raping their own children. You want me to be civil about that? I will never be civil about that. And that's what feminism is. We will not be civil about oppression and degradation of human beings. And and when we say human beings, we are saying women are human beings.
but we are raised in a culture that says men are the human beings. Because when you turn on your TV, who's talking to you every day? Now you have elections. Who is running? Where are the women? Yeah? Why don't you ask yourself, where are we in this room? Why are the women not there? Yet in your family setup is different. Why doesn't your nation reflect your family? And yet we use African values, African tradition. Well, how come your nation doesn't look like your family? Well, don't you ask yourself, isn't it absurd that your family people who lead you don't look like people you interact with every day? So it means that women's experiences are left behind, their voices are marginalized, and we are not going to be civil. Women like Winnie Mandela, he said, I am not a kind of woman who is here to receive your flowers. I'm a fighter, and we're fighters. And we come from lineage of long lives of fighters. And that's what feminism is to me. So we don't expect civility, respectability. What are they going to say about me? Who said that that's what determines your freedom? The more you're invested in what people say about you, the more you lose your freedom. So feminism is not about what people say about you. Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, Rosebell. That was really powerful. And just to answer my Nigerian brother with the question about how we're reaching younger people with feminist messaging, I think we use different tools, right? There is social media, there is, speaking at the community level, telling people about human rights, and I like how Rosebell broke down what feminism really is. It's just the respect for human dignity. Whether I am woman, I am man, I am a child, whatever it is, I just deserve human dignity, and that's what we're teaching the younger generation to fight for. And so this can take different forms. It can take writing a book, it can take talking on social media, it can take going to the classrooms, it can take creating Nalafem, which is a platform for younger generations to also have conversations and also learn, and also unlearn as well, because of course there's a part for unlearning. So we have great platforms for young people to understand feminism, and I like how she said that ignorance is no longer an excuse, right? You can clearly see the oppressions that women face, and so you should be a part of the system, not just me teaching, not just Aya or Rosebell, but you as men as well. What are you teaching your boys? What are you teaching your girls? Are you teaching them separately, or are you teaching them together as a unit? Thank you.
Okay. So I would just like to step in as well on the question that was asked about how you can channel feminism to human development, and whether feminism has been breaking down households and the like. I believe that in itself, the feminist struggle, or the feminist movement rather, is one that has brought out the potential of women in Africa, and we cannot make that any more clear, because it obviously has brought out women such as the women that you're seeing here today. And so the idea behind feminism really is not that it wants to bring down men, just as Ross has been emphasized, not that it wants to take down men, it wants to take down a system. And it also wants to bring out just how valuable women are as individuals, just how much dignified they are, and that they're as human as they can get. And so what feminism is trying to do is not even trying to make women as equal to men or equal to men in any single way. It's bringing out women for who they are. And this is important, because I like to say this. Whenever anyone asks me saying why women have to be in power, why do women need, leadership positions or anything like that, I like to say because men have been in power for so long, and look at where we've ended. We are devastated. There are too many problems, and maybe that's because we don't have enough women stepping up. And so the feminist movement should be seen as a movement that is bringing about partnership and not a threat. And I really love how Rosebell has said that if it's too much for you, then leave the room, because there's nothing like too much of being yourself. If this is what you want to be, then you have to go for it. So the idea behind it is that it brings about development, because everyone is playing their role, everyone is realizing just how valuable they are, and everyone is coming together to partner towards that. And I believe in households, why sometimes feminism is seen as a struggle, or it's seen as one of those things that could break down a household, is because people lack understanding of what feminism is actually about. And so this is really what I wanted to say, and just comment and say the fact that people can realize what their role is and how valuable they are, and that we can treat them that way, means that we are actually developing, because then they can harness their potential and they can contribute positively to development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Before we close and I hand over to Okeme, I want to also introduce my sister, also Nala, council member, Jaha Dukureh, who really needs no introduction because she has been at the forefront of the movement to end female genital mutilation and child marriage in her country, but she inspired a movement in Africa and across the world. So I would like to give her the floor to also share her thoughts.
Thank you very much, Aya, and I'm really, really sorry. I'm coming from the US, so the time difference has really affected me being here, but I'm very grateful to be here this morning and to just say how proud I am of the entire Nalafem councillors as well as Aya herself for pioneering this work, because I think there's not a lot of spaces for African women like us to convene, but not only to convene, but to also support each other, because what a lot of us would not say is how lonely our journeys can be. And having a sisterhood like this, and having a space where we can come and be our authentic selves and not be conditioned by what, because in Africa, our struggles and our challenges are not the same as what the West is. And Western feminism and our feminism is totally different. There are certain things, what it means to them and what it means to us, it's not the same. So a feminism that's rooted in our culture, that's rooted in our traditions, that's rooted in who we are and our identity as Africans. And that is why I am proud to be part of this group and looking forward to working with young people in Nigeria, all across the continent of Africa. I love this continent. I feel like if there's anything about me, is how much I love Africa and African people. And I think now more than ever, coming together, both male and female, if we don't do it, our continent will forever be known as the poor continent, those people with diseases and all of this. But there's power in our numbers, right? We have the most youthful population in the world. We are beautiful people. Our culture is beautiful. Even the colors that we wear, when you walk into a room and you see Africans, it's just something different about us. And I think that's our power. So thank you guys for having me this morning.
Thank you so much. I think because we're pressed of time, we're close, so I'll also want to say thank you again for coming. Thank you for listening, for asking questions. And I Am Nala is also about Ubuntu. I am because of who we all are. And I always say there is no Pan-Africanism without feminism, because the women who fought for independence and they went invisible and they were excluded, the women who fought at the front line of revolutions, they didn't tell their own stories. They were erased from history, and we don't want that to happen to our generation and future generations. I want girls 30 years from now to read our story and know what we've been through and know how we got there and know that they can do better. So thank you so much for being here, for listening to us, for joining hands with Nala, and I hope this is the start of a conversation, and this is the start of a larger collective from Nigeria to Tunisia to Ghana to Gambia to Uganda. Your liberation is our liberation, your struggle is our struggle, and we are here in Nigeria to actually stand in solidarity with young feminists in Nigeria. So we are a platform to support, to collaborate, and to stand in solidarity with each other. Thank you.